Oh, I like. Okay. Okay. All right.
We are live.
So we're getting it. We are live. We're going to send, like, first things first, we're going to send a big fat happy birthday out to Lawrence Winterman, who is
Happy
celebrating
birthday.
his day today. And because of that, I'm on my own with the tech side. So we're gonna figure it out here. Hold on, let's see. There we are. We're a little bigger there. All right. So I'm sure most of our viewers know you, Arturo, but take a second and introduce yourself to those who don't have the pleasure.
Well, I'm Arturo Dominguez, Cuban American. I write a lot about Cuba, Latin America, immigration, things like that. I do the Decolonized Journalism newsletter, also the editor at Antagonist Mag. So, just kind of getting around doing my stuff.
Yeah, getting around doing your stuff. Yeah, if you haven't followed or subscribed over there to Decolonized Journalism, I got that right? Yes.
Yeah.
That you got to get on that. Every time we have one of these discussions, it's like going to school. The last time I took 3 pages of notes, and we're probably going to do the same again today because you educate me so much on, like every time we have this conversation, we talk about how the U.S. public education system did not adequately inform us to be inundated with news from Latin America and South America. So this show is called CounterStory Perspectives for a reason. We audit existing narratives one story at a time. And the big thing right now with South America is just getting educated to know what we're talking about and what to process when it comes to the headlines. So when we see a headline in America that, oh, we're bombing Ecuador now, we're engaging in Ecuador. Why are we engaging in Ecuador? We're going to start filling in some of those blanks because a lot of us over the last, it hasn't been very long. A lot of us since January. It was only January when Maduro was kidnapped.
Yeah.
So a lot of us had to do a lot of catching up on Latin American history to even figure out why we were in Venezuela.
Yeah.
So here we are now. So I don't want to say your area of specialty because you talk all over Latin America, but you are Cuban American, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you have family still in Cuba.
Yeah.
So
a lot, yeah.
I'm going to go to the obvious and let's just focus on Cuba first. We're waiting for Elizabeth Raven. We're hoping she can join us. She is in Caracas, so hopefully the internet isn't giving her issues there and preventing her from logging on. But until then, let's talk all things Cuba and what's going on currently in Cuba and what has led to this. Not to make you summarize like 60 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of false narratives about Cuba. And I recently wrote an article about challenging dishonest debate around Cuba because there's so much of it. And a lot of it comes from the bubble in Miami where, rhetoric tends to get a little more hyperbolic as time goes by. Different narratives are thrown out there, and a lot of it is just not true. The idea that like Cuba's not democratic, things like that. There's a lot of democratic like things that Cuba does. I'm not saying it's perfect, right? Like Cuba has a lot of issues, but we can't overlook the fact that there's been 67 years of sanctions. There's more than 1,000 now. Cuba can't buy anything with more than 10% U.S. parts in it. Cuba can't use international banking. They're on a cash and trade basis, like barter system and stuff. And, it's been a struggle for Cuba, but, one of the things that people tend to overlook, and I saw an article this morning in The Guardian where one of their reporters spent a lot of time in Eastern Cuba, and they talked to like 70 or 80 people. And she highlighted that the one thing politicians overlook, and I argue that pretty much everybody overlooks, is that, we're a very nationalist type of people. Our history is about, fighting for independence and maintaining that independence. And a lot of people overlook that. And that plays a huge role in pushing back against the United States. Because, yeah, sure, things could be better in Cuba, but nobody wants the United States to just come in and take over. A lot of Cubans will point to Puerto Rico and, all the power grid problems they have there, poverty, like all kinds of different things. And they're like, that's not what we want. Like essentially, they're like, we already have that, like we don't, except for we have healthcare, we have free education, we have free housing. They don't want to lose all that and then end up being Puerto Rico. So yeah, there's always a lot of pushback. So even like the anti-government types that are highly critical of the government, they're in disagreement with what the U.S. is doing and making them suffer more. You're not. Their argument is the same argument I've been making for over a decade. Like, you're not winning over anybody by starving them. You're not making friends. So you can't ask them to do something in the middle of putting your boot on their neck, so to speak.
And when you talk about, because a lot of times we aren't aware, because like you pointed out before, a lot of the voices that we see from Cuba are white, are from white Cubans. So there's a little bit of a perspective maybe from the U.S. viewpoint that most Cubans are white, and that isn't true. So talk about the reality of the racial disparity and how that's played into sort of where we are.
Well, initially when Castro took over, one of the first things he did was desegregate the island. Hey.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello.
But while a lot of the elites fled Cuba when Castro took over, because he was cracking down.
There is something wrong.
Can you hear us?
Nope.
Oh, she's gonna try.
So a lot of the elites left, fled Cuba. They feared, reprisals from Castro and stuff. And one of the first things he did was desegregate the island. And after that first initial wave of like the really wealthy Cubans, the mobsters, the people that own the casinos, Castro was cracking down on criminal networks. So, you had all those people that fled in the very first wave. But, communism didn't come to Cuba till 1961 for another 2 years. So a lot of people, a lot of the middle class that didn't really own anything, didn't have much to speak of. Maybe they had a small business or something. They fled because of desegregation. They didn't want their kids going to school with black kids. They used this idea of indoctrination centers, that Castro was going to open indoctrination centers, and that's basically was desegregated schools. There was no indoctrination centers, and there was the first couple of years there was the labor camps thing, which is like typical of like old communist ideas. But there was a lot of pushback on that, and that ended relatively quick. And by 1961, 1962, there was no real labor camps to speak of. The Marxism and Leninism stuff came in 1961. And a lot of that had to do with the United States kind of isolating Cuba, while Castro tried to, have a working relationship with the United States. The United States kind of isolated the island, and Castro had this idea that the U.S. would be willing to work with him because the U.S. was denying weapons to Batista to defend the Batista regime from the Castro revolution. So Castro automatically treated that as like, hey, the U.S. is on our side.
Yeah.
And then when he tried to go work deals with the U.S., they isolated him. And, after a couple of years, they were forced to turn to Russia. They had nowhere else to turn. So, yeah, there's kind of this weird dynamic. And I know I kind of drifted from the race thing, but there's a real thing where like most people think that all Cubans are white Cubans. And that's because of what I call the white flight out of Cuba in 1959 and 1960. And that was a lot of it was due to desegregation. So most of Cuba is either mixed race or Afro-Cuban. In the 60s, there was a lot of Asians. There's still Jewish Cubans there. Like, it's a very diverse island, and hate crimes aren't something you hear about there. But you come to the United States and you start talking to Cubans here, and they're a lot more hostile, a lot more volatile, a lot more hyperbolic. A lot of them are really racist. So there's this weird dynamic between the diaspora and the island that they just don't jive. They don't come together. Yeah, it's a huge separation of ideas. That's for sure.
All right, let's welcome in Elizabeth. I'm glad you could join us. Elizabeth is on the ground in Caracas, and for those of us who I said you're in Venezuela on the ground. So for those of us who may not know you, do a quick introduction, real quick.
Okay, well, I'm a retired professor at Caracas at the main university of the country. I'm still researching, but not teaching. And well, it doesn't matter my profession. It matters that I get here in Substack to tell people what it is to live here, what's actually Venezuela.
Yes.
Outside propaganda.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you're here to do it. So let's get into that. Let's get into what's going on the ground in now when we have the U.S. president. What did he call Delcy? The president-elect?
Yeah,
let's talk about that.
Yeah, and the legitimate government,
Yeah.
So, it's very funny because, all those journalists in Miami and Spain are kind of crazy trying to explain that he said that, but he didn't mean that. And, it's like what he meant was that whatever the crazy explanation they want, because they just can't accept what's happening. It's not like I trust anything, but but the fact is that we are opening consulates each side, in the States and here, some time ago, like a month ago, they already opened the embassy here. And I know that they have to do that because they will be having most or more U.S. citizens here, many of them, in businesses, many of them are like tourists. So they need the embassy open, and they cannot open it if we don't do that the same in the United States. I'm very, very clear. But you don't open embassy in a country where you don't accept the government.
Right.
So that's the fact. I don't care why he's doing it, but that's a fact.
No,
and,
they normalize relationship with the current government.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's all totally normalized, and if you see the thing, trying to be objective, they came here, I mean, South Command Chief and Energy Secretary and a lot of people from the government they came here. We didn't went there. They came here because they need something from us. And yes, they are having it, but we never said ever that we didn't want to make business with the United States.
Yeah.
It was Trump. He's the one that, decided that the oil businesses was closed for them. I mean, our oil business. And they did everything that, for us to crawl and beg them. And we didn't, because with the help of Russia, China, Iran, we just start like again extracting our oil, refining our oil to gasoline. So for us, I know we are under threat, because it wasn't a video game what happened here on January the 3rd. It was
Right.
awful.
Yeah.
And we're afraid. We are very aware of whatever happens, like this new known position. But still, we're receiving money.
Yeah.
We're signing contracts. We're very, as far as I know, I read yesterday that we signed contract with Shell Corporation, and we've signed with 2 intermediaries that are selling all the oil that we had in deposit, because we couldn't trade it if
Yeah.
we didn't want to be for that to be stolen or steal like they did. So far, life here is like everyday life. For common people, like for me, nothing happened, nothing changed. I was telling in my last note before I came here with you that we had yesterday our 7th communal election, which is a figure where the government is trying to empower people to propose their own solutions for their needs. So they propose projects like every communal council proposed 1 or 2 projects, and it is going through we have like 49,000 and plus communal councils, and we have like 5,000 and some more communes. So yesterday we had an election for what projects we wanted to be executed in our communities, and it's going to be executed. They have been executed
What kind
by
of projects? What kind of projects are you talking? Are these like infrastructure projects, or like,
any kind of project? Any kind of project. If a community decides in a communal meeting, that they need like a pump for water for the neighborhood because the one that's working is working badly and they don't have water like every day or whatever. So that's what they propose. But it can be that, it can be improving the houses of the neighborhood. In the case of poor neighborhoods, sometimes they need the ceilings need reparations because here it rains a lot. So you need to have a good ceiling. Or if you have a community where people are trying to start like a communal business, okay, they decide that they are gonna, I don't know, it depends on the place. If it is on the rural areas, they might think that they want to produce carrots and whatever produce they think they can do. So that's their project. Or maybe they need a bridge because they have a river and the bridge broke, and then they have problems with that. The thing is that communities decide what they need.
Yeah.
It's not decided above, it's like in a regular
this is sounding very attractive right now.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to find the flaw in this plan.
Yeah, this is the seventh time that we have this kind of election, which are local elections, and and they have been very helpful for the communities and
Yeah.
people. You know what they do? I mean they, because in middle class neighborhoods, uh, we don't execute, with our hands the project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There in poor neighborhoods, they do. It's like the government cannot, like, say this company will execute your project. No, it's not how it works. They give the money, you know,
Yeah.
and then the community, if they can, they do it by themselves. So they just buy the materials or tools they need, and the community pay
So you
to
mean
the.
the local senator doesn't have a nephew who automatically gets a giant government contract where all
No.
that money goes, and he has a Tesla,
Yeah,
but somehow the project isn't done.
yeah, the money goes directly to the commune or the uh,
Yeah.
council, and then they decide who executes it. If they need to hire engineers, they do, but they try always to use their labor,
Yeah.
Yeah.
their own people, because it's like the money stays, not only the result, but the money is
Yes.
staying in the community. So well, that's what we call the communal government. So we
Yeah.
have two parallel governments, no? The
Yeah.
regular one, like yours, with governor and
Yeah.
president, governor, and mayor, and all that bureaucracy. And then we have the communal government,
Oh,
who
wow.
work
How
like
does
in the.
how does
Yeah.
security factor into that? Because we know that there's been action taken in Ecuador, which isn't exactly your neighbor, but nearby there, and their justification is cartels. So in Venezuela, what does the security force look like in terms of police, local police, military, stuff like that? And then how do you handle cartel activity when it does occur in
Yeah,
Venezuela?
we haven't had cartel activity in most of the country for years.
Yeah.
Uh, on the coast, there are some people, that still take like a few shipments to the islands. Okay,
Yeah.
and even those are controlled by the army, usually. Okay, and then they just destroy the drugs. But in general, the security, it's very good in Venezuela. You know, uh, the actually the last 25 years, the relationship between the people and military or police is very good, because what Chavez did is, first, he decided that if we are a peace country, we won't spend a lot of money in an army, which is be in the bases, just waiting for a war that never comes, uh,
That
or
sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah.
or securing the borders. So they are starting to put the military to help people. They were building bridges to communities. They were like pavimenting streets. They even helped to bring food to the communities, to open markets, and the same with the police. So it established a relationship between the people and the armed forces. So we now are very confident with them around if they are. Okay, if ever they are around, we feel safe. Before, in the past, we felt threatened every
Yeah.
time there was a police nearby or a soldier, and that's been very different. And that was all Chavez. You know, Chavez, he decided things like this. For example, inside the military, he stopped the bullying. You know, it was like in the past, very past, 30 years ago. I know that for a fact because my nephew, he was taken at that time. It wasn't voluntarily like today. You know,
Oh,
Yeah.
you could have been taken from the street. Because you were black. Okay, like he is. So I mean, my nephew, he tells me that it was awful, the treatment that the new soldiers received from the upper ranks,
yeah, yeah,
and it became like very normalized. So they were just like accepting it, and because later I will do the same to the next one, and it wasn't like a revenge
yeah,
culture, and he stopped that, and he just started to teach soldiers through all of the military that was like with him, to help the people, to be present, to uh, to stop being a threat to the people on the streets,
yeah,
and that allowed them to you know uh, take the bad guys, the delinquents, uh, easily, because people would say, okay, you need to go there to take this, uh, uh, like robbers or criminals that are harassing us. Go there. We even help you.
yeah,
And yeah, and they have established in the last decade very good ways to police. So, so actually, Venezuela is now safer than ever, and it's not that I say that; it's like the numbers say that.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
No,
you can see that. Yeah,
yeah, it shows. I think a couple of years ago, the crime numbers in Venezuela had dropped drastically, and that's when Trump started saying, "Oh, that's because they sent all their criminals up here."
hmm,
Yeah, I remember. I remember that. Yeah, that was his excuse. To it's only safe because they emptied their prisons and sent all their insane asylum. I don't even know. Trump
yeah,
is out there. Yeah,
yeah, and they've been coming back, for the last 4 years, and still very safe. So
yeah,
that's not true. Yeah, because we didn't choose the ones that came.
right,
They were.
right.
Yeah, we just send planes, and they put whoever they want in the plane. So they should be putting the worst of the worst in those
Yeah,
planes to
yes.
them to come back here, and we're still very safe.
Well, I
yeah,
So
wanted to ask you about that too, because I know we had talked about a few weeks ago the amount of people that have been coming back being deported from the U.S. and how they were being received in Venezuela. Since last month, have you seen more people, or has been the flow been pretty steady? And what's happening to those people when they are deported from the U.S. and land in Venezuela, particularly those
okay.
who don't really have family there?
Okay. Well, most of them have family here, because that's the way it works when you have migrations because of economical poor situations.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody goes there. No, it's like just some go there because it's cheaper to live here, and they send money. No, it's something around it. Sometimes, somehow they realize that they weren't able to send money because it barely was good for them. They
Yeah.
were not having like the American dream. But the thing is that we have like, it depends on, basically it depends on the United States. We have like, we send our um, flights, our airline flights that only can go to the United States to look for Venezuelans. We are not allowed to like send tourists there or
Yeah.
anything like that. They just sanction that too. But we have a special permission to do this. We send like once or twice a week, depending on the numbers of Venezuelans that they want to be deported. And then, so they are here received by Diosdado Cabello directly, the Minister of Interior, we call it here. And they, from there, they first are going to have checked, or, they are checked for health. Okay. They, first of all, they need to know how is their health, if they have been tortured or not, because they need to like report that to international organizations if they need to. And they check for the how do you call that, if they had committed crimes here before they went there.
Right.
Because if usually it's a very few, but in each plane maybe will come 2 or 3 criminals which had like pending trials here, that had a warrant, but they flew because of that. And okay, so then they are taken to the police, and those trials start, and the rest they are being taken care of until they find their families. They and when the government knows where to send them, they do. The government finish its job when they go to the house of the mother or the wife or whoever, and they say, here is your son. Okay. Sometimes they go to the airport to receive their families. Sometimes, because not every time they know, because what happens frequently is that the US sends a list, like let's say 200 Venezuelans, and then what the ones who come are not the same, or some are the same, but there are less of them. So not always the families are able to receive their sons or brothers or whatever it is. And sometimes they don't have the money to come here to look for them. So so either the government pays them to come and takes them there where they live, or they just send the person who came. But they are usually very well taken care of. It's like we have ads like every day on the social network, on TV, telling Venezuelans outside, especially the US, that they are welcome, they are our sons, that we need them here, so they feel free to even deportate themselves, which some have done that. There are now happening things like the sister of my best friend, she's from the opposition, She lives now in Uruguay, but before she was in the States, and she is planning to come back.
Hmm.
And she now tells her sister, "I'm almost Chavez now."
That's
Wow.
funny.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we look at the global, like if we zoom out and look at the global picture, I feel like you said something the other day when we spoke that now that Trump seems to have gotten himself into a pickle with Iran, now we are friends with Venezuela. Oh, we're gonna give you, we're gonna call your president, we're gonna give you all this deference because now we're in a situation with oil where Iran has held these purse strings for so long, but now we're going to start playing nice with Venezuela.
Yes, actually, I was reading an article from one of our legislators, and he said something that clicked on me because it's what I think. It's like when you are in this kind of asymmetric war,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot win with bombs. We are not Iran.
Right.
We don't have that. Okay.
Yeah.
We could win on the ground war.
Yeah.
We have the people trained, we have a difficult terrain, but the kind of war that they, put on our faces, we cannot do
Yeah.
Right.
with arms. So this guy said that in that kind of war, you have to create an special advantage. So
Right.
if you do that, the one who is attacking you, he will suffer almost as much as you if they try to destabilize us. It's like
Yeah.
at this moment they are treating us very well,
Yeah.
not because they love us, okay, but because they need us.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we did that. It's like, oh, you want our oil? Okay, we're gonna sell our oil to you. We always wanted, so we will. And okay, let's do it quickly. The reform to our hydrocarbons law, it was like this. In like 3 weeks, it was approved unanimously.
Yeah.
The consultations were made like very quickly because actually we needed the contracts to be signed as soon as possible. Because, for example, I know that we have signed with Shell and we have another companies here. We need more and we need it now, because as soon as that happens, Trump will have his hands tied, because in the United States, money run.
Yep.
So those companies won't let him to lose their investment. As long as they know they're going to have money, they won't accept Trump to, like, throw it away. It happened with Chevron, which was the only company working in Venezuela before this whole thing, before January 3rd. And he tried, as soon as he got in power, he tried to annul the license that that Chevron had. And he even did it, only it was going to take place like 3 months later. And he had to take it back because Chevron said, you're not going to do that. It took a while for us to convince Venezuela that we could start again our relationship. And we won't let you do what you did with all the other companies.
Yeah.
So now that's what we wait. We know that he can still, because he's unpredictable.
Yes.
He can still
Yes.
do well. He's so unpredictable that he started a war in Iran.
Yeah.
That no, I don't think any advisor, any good advisor said that she should have done that, and he did. So we're not safe at all.
Yeah.
We know that.
Well, I wanted to talk about the connection between, because Trump is so unstable, and because there's such a lack of predictability from his regime, that countries are starting to work around us to establish connections. And Venezuela provided internet to Cuba. You've got China sending solar panels to Cuba. Arturo, what are people now? I'm not saying that Cubans ever were in a position that they were fully trusting the U.S. government, because I don't think that's ever been really a thing. But if it were me, I feel like I'd be a point where I'm just about fed up and done entirely with the entire U.S. bullshit. So what's the general feeling from Cubans about the position they find themselves in, and any type of ongoing relationship with the U.S.?
Well, most Cubans are really frustrated, angry, with the United States. Like I said earlier, it's a very nationalist island. They take a lot of pride in their independence. So, they're not thrilled about being forced into this, dynamic where the U.S. has control over everything. But, like Venezuela, supposedly, Donald Trump has a deal on the table, right? That's economic focused, that would, open Cuba up for travelers, probably have a resort of his or something built there, that kind of stuff. It doesn't sound like he's really asking for much. And again, I think, like Venezuela, he wants to be able to say that he did something, positive. So while, in the US, we portray the deal with Venezuela almost like we own it, right? Like we're making all the decisions for the country, and like there isn't 30 million people there.
Right.
They're essentially treating Cuba the same way. And, I see a lot of the reporting on cable news and stuff, and the only people they ever talk to are, the far right Cubans in Miami and, at Versailles, that cafeteria, that restaurant where all the hardliner Cubans hang out. That's where they go, and that's who they talk to. You don't see them going to the island and talking to the, mostly non-white population there. I was surprised to see that Guardian report be so candid about, the truth that, Cubans are really angry about this situation. Aside from not winning anybody over by trying to starve them, China is becoming even more popular by giving Cubans solar panels and trying to, supplement the grid. During the day, solar panels provide up to like around 38% of Cuba's electricity. They don't have storage for it, but during the day, peak hours, it operates pretty well. And the grid is starting to see signs of life, the 20-hour blackouts, or maybe 16 hours. But, they're getting by. And, again, it's like you said, it's just frustrating. They're just kind of sick of this shit with the United States. And every time they find some sort of a workaround to some sanctions or something like that, the U.S. comes along and hinders that. So, for example, a couple of weeks ago, the United States announced that they were going to allow the resale of Venezuelan oil to Cuba. And it was only going to be to private businesses, which, 51% of Cuba's economy operates on private businesses. But then 2 days later, they tell those Cuban businesses, you can't use Cuban banks. That's the only banks these businesses have access to.
Yeah.
Cuba doesn't have access to international banking. It's not like they can just open an account at Chase,
Yeah.
from Cuba. So
Yeah.
again, the U.S. wants to make itself look like it's doing something right, and the media helped with that. They're going to let them resell the oil, but then when the little restriction about not being able to use
Yeah.
Cuban banks came along, no one said anything about that. So yeah, I mean, what does that really accomplish? You put sanctions on a country where you can't sell anything to the government, but the government administers their healthcare system, their housing system, their education system. So by default, you're crippling all these things. You're crippling the food production capacity. You're crippling being able to transport food from one side of the island to the other. So yeah, it's this weird duplicitous thing where you only hear the good parts of what the United States is doing, but then you don't
Yeah.
hear about the bad parts that go along with it. So, when they say that food and medicine aren't subject to sanctions, that's not necessarily true when, the United States lists all pharmaceutical compounds as industrial chemicals, which are, along the same lines as, poison and stuff. So
Yeah.
you can't sell industrial chemicals to Cuba means you can't sell medicine to Cuba. When it comes to food, same thing. If it's produced or manufactured in the United States, it's sanctioned. People like
And what are the restrictions on, because this really blew me away and showed my privilege and ignorance, because when another friend talked about their family being in pretty dire straits in Cuba, I said, oh my God, what can we do to help? Can we start a GoFundMe? And she laughed. It was like, well, no, because we can't send the money. So what
right.
are all the restrictions? Let's say you had a loved one in Cuba and you wanted to send them something. What are all the restrictions?
For me to send money to Cuba, I would have to do it through a third party. And tip right now, I think there's only one or two countries that are offering that type of a service, and it has to go through Spain. During Trump's first administration, he put a restriction on remittances, because prior to that, we were able to send money Western Union. Once he put the restrictions on remittances, every Western Union on the island closed. So there was no way to send money. And even now, if you wanted to fly there and bring cash, even that could be a problem if you have a bunch of cash in your pocket at TSA and Customs and Border Protection, and then you get to Cuba and you have a bunch of cash in your pocket. People are going to start asking questions why you have so much cash in your pocket. But I mean, that could be problematic. Even if I were to fly to Cuba right now and say I wanted to bring a suitcase full of medicine, it's limited to 22 pounds or $800. After that, I have to apply for a license from the Department of Commerce to be able to bring medicines to the island. So there's these weird restrictions, and if somebody, say Pfizer, decides, you know what, screw these sanctions, we're going to send medicine down there, and they pack up a boat and they send it down there, they're going to get sanctioned like crazy. They're going to have to pay these huge fines. And then whoever owns that boat can't dock in the United States for 6 months. And that's how it is. Any boat that delivers anything to Cuba can't dock in the United States for 6 months. So who is going to try to skirt sanctions and then risk losing all that money from not being able to dock in the United States? That's why recently you've been hearing a lot about shadow fleets. And the U.S. classifies these as shadow fleets, but they're not really. They throw off their location on purpose so they don't get caught, because the U.S. will try to sanction them or seize the ship or whatever. But for the most part, they're not really shadow fleets. They're just not allowed to dock in the U.S. because they travel from South America to Cuba and back and forth, or Iran or Russia or China. And those ships, you have certain ships that don't necessarily want to dock in the United States. They do business in Africa. They do business, different parts of the world. So they'll come to Cuba, bring some stuff, and then, go back to their side to do what they do. But, Cuba has these barter agreements, like with the ALBA TCP, with Venezuela, where, you trade, you can trade resources for stuff. And Venezuela, through the ALBA TCP, Venezuela was sending so much aid to Cuba. It's just incredible. But then, when it comes to the barter system, like one of the things, the commercial agreements that Mexico has with Cuba is They send oil, Cuba sends back aggregate material for, the Maya train, the train that goes from northern Mexico to southern Mexico. And those trades work, and they're ways to skirt sanctions. You can't sanction donations, you can't sanction, gifts. When even when they put the oil blockade on there, Mexico continued to send aid. If the United States tried to sanction Mexico for sending aid, obviously the United Nations and the rest of the world is going to be up in arms. Like, what do you mean? You're literally trying to starve these people. So, they allow Mexico and Canada and stuff to send aid, and it continues to make the United States look like we're trying to be the good guys. In that same note, like, a lot of people will point to, the United States sent $500 million, in trade with Cuba. That adds up to about $50 a person on the island for the whole year. And most of that $500 million comes in the form of raw chicken. And, that adds up to about 5 pounds per person per month. That's not enough to live on. They send enough aid just to give people enough of a caloric intake, calories, to just survive. And that's the same strategy that they used against Palestinians for 40, 50 years.
Right.
So, you see these comparisons between Cuba and Palestine, and it's hard to look away from that. So, a lot of people have been referring to Cuba as the U.S.'s Gaza, and it's hard not to look at it like that.
Right. It's hard not to. I just saw an article that in February 26th, the U.S. announced $6 million in humanitarian aid to be sent only through organizations like the Catholic Church, not through the government. And that adds up to $1 a person or less.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Okay, so they sent that in February, and it was supposed to be hurricane relief. The hurricane was in November, and in that time, Venezuela again sent, I don't even remember, 12,000 tons of aid into Cuba, and the United States comes, 3 months later with $6 million. Meanwhile, all the other countries like Jamaica and stuff, they immediately got 35 million, 50 million from the United States in aid, like overnight.
Yeah.
With Cuba, they drug that out for months. And it's only available through Catholic charities. And when you consider that $6 million is for an area with a 3.2 million population, it comes out to like $1 or $2 per person. And, some of the stuff, the only things that they're allowed to buy with that are just ridiculous. Like kitchen stuff, like a pot and pan and utensils. The limitations on the money are pretty extreme, and they don't involve a lot of food. Rice is about it. Rice is about it. And it's pretty ridiculous. It's kind of a slap in the face. So Mike Hammer was traveling all over the island with his little $6 million delivering it to churches and stuff. And the whole time Cubans are protesting him. And of course the US government is like, look at these evil Cubans protesting our Mike Hammer. And I mean, again, you can't starve people and expect them to be happy about it. I don't understand why it's so complicated to wrap your head around the idea that Cubans are pissed.
Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah. It's the same in Venezuela,
Right. Yeah.
What do they expect? They want us to be very happy. No, we're not. We're not.
There's a report that came out a few months ago, and a lot of people have been referring to it recently in the last week or so because of Iran. And it has to do with U.S. sanctions. And for the last 50 years, they checked for the last 50 years, U.S. sanctions have killed 38 million people. It averages somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 people a year. They compared those to United Nations sanctions, and United Nations sanctions don't kill people because they don't sanction the way the U.S. does. They don't sanction to make people suffer.
Yeah.
The UN has, pretty strict guidelines on who you can and can't sanction and the impacts of those sanctions. The U.S. just ignores those, imposes its own sanctions, and, people die. So for the last 33 years, the United Nations has voted, except for 2 countries, have voted to lift the embargo on Cuba. and the U.S. has veto power, so they veto the resolution. But the only other country that ever votes with the U.S. consistently is Israel, and these are the same two countries who refuse to sign on to food being a human right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now Millet, because
And now
he's like
Milei,
that.
right, right. Recently we saw Ukraine sign on to it too, because Ukraine is dependent on the U.S. for weapons. And if that doesn't tell you that this is all political, nothing will.
Yeah.
Ukraine signed on with the U.S. to veto the resolution only for political reasons, and everything about it is political, which makes this a violation of international law. Like, you can't meddle in other countries' internal affairs like they did when they kidnapped Maduro, and like what they're doing to Cuba, the sanctions they've had on Iran, like all these things. To sanction a country to force regime change is a violation of international law. The U.S. just does it. Yeah. Nobody ever really pushes back, and when you saw the U.S. sub sink the Iranian battleship that was unarmed off of the coast of Sri Lanka, India basically ratted that boat out to the U.S. They're responsible for it sinking because they told the U.S. about it. And then yesterday, what's his name? It's on the tip of my tongue. From the Deputy Secretary Landau from the Department of State did a talk in India, and he straight told these Indians, everybody in India, that we're not going to make the same mistake we did with China and allow you to compete with the United States. And I'm like, what kind of an ally is that? Like, they're saying all these things out loud, and the incompetence of this, I say this all the time, the incompetence of this administration is exposing what the United States does to other countries all over the place. I mean, they just can't shut up about it.
If there's one good thing about this regime, it's they've pulled the curtain back entirely. Like, we didn't know about a lot of stuff that our country was doing. And now we can't help but know, because they can't stop talking about it. They can't stop running their mouth. Yeah. And they think certain things are achievements.
And now you said before, people are going around the states. So now some people write me and say, oh, but now they are forcing you to not make business with China. Well, that's not exactly true,
Yeah.
Because our only business with China is not oil.
Right.
Yesterday, we have now like a fair of agricultural and farmer, businesses in Venezuela who are even exporting now. And I just knew that China invested in some industrial, facilities to process our sardines and pack them to go to China. And that is happening because it's like we have embargoes to tankers, but not to every ship that we send, outside the country, because those are private initiatives. And then they try not to touch that, because of as long as it's exporting and it doesn't touch like their interest, it happens. Like we're exporting to China too, seafood, like how do you call shrimps?
Yeah.
Actually, one of the companies that Trump striked in the past, because it was like drug cartels port. It actually was a shrimp company, and they are still making the offshore platform in the Gulf of Venezuela for oil, and most of their businesses are like for long range, is like for the future. And that's the way they work around the world.
Yeah.
They can build a train in Africa, and of course they need the train to transport whatever they are important, but they build the train, and the train is there helping their people. So, and they never try for you to change your politics.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you are socialist or capitalist or anarchist or whatever you want to be. So we still have businesses with China. Of course, we know that we can't at this moment like send gas or oil to China without some help, underground help that the United States like don't know. But they pretty much, it's not like they don't care. They don't care if that is happening now. They are very patient.
Yeah.
And they are now starting international suits. Is that correct? They are suing the United
Oh,
States.
yeah.
Yeah.
Lawsuit. Yeah.
Lawsuit.
Yeah, because they have signed contracts with Venezuela, and he cannot interfere according with international commercial laws. And we all know that Trump doesn't care about it,
Right.
but it's just a matter of time when their companies, not him, but their companies are going to have to pay if they don't do something. And they are working in a diplomatic way to help us. It's like, okay, you don't touch Venezuela again, or you won't have any more our rare earth.
Yeah.
And they are openly helping Iran with their radars and satellite information.
Yep.
So it's not like they are going to get in the country with their weapons to fight.
Right.
That's not the way they work. But they are doing it. Those are rumors. But what I've heard from many analysts is that the night of the attack to Venezuela, they didn't respond. They had the way to respond. We had here like weapons from them, and they talked to Venezuela, and they agreed that it was senseless for the government of Venezuela to let kill like thousands of people. That was insane. We didn't have the way to defend ourselves.
Right.
And China and Russia are too far. So they just China and Russia, they just talked to Trump, and that diplomatically they stopped him to, like do more harm.
Right. Yeah. Political support.
And of course, that's something like underground. Usually those agreements, we don't know about them, like obviously in the open years later, like the crisis of the missiles, where never knew at the time that they had to take out the bases from Turkey. Yeah, they just did that 6 months later, and it was part of the agreement. But for Russia, it wasn't a thing of honor that people knew. Okay, they just wanted the bases out.
Yeah.
And it's the same here. There are agreements and there are things happening, and even though he tries to project this tough image, we just let him, because who cares? It's like,
Yeah.
just say whatever. You can say that Delcy is doing what you say and you are the one governing here. We know that she doesn't, because she's doing here things that you don't like. And
That's true.
and you don't stop her. You just can't. Even though
Yeah.
he thinks, I don't know. I don't think he thinks. I think he says,
Yeah.
because
Right.
he has people there that, they're magas. I mean, his magas that he tells. It's like the same with this Christy Noem thing.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's like the way they did. For me, it's not a coincidence that the one who put Christy Noem in a spot at the congressman hearing was a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
That was the plan.
Yep.
They made an excuse for her to be changed to other position, but they already had planned to do that a year in advance. She had
Yeah.
already met with different presidents
did.
of
Yep.
Latin America. So, as Arturo said, that's a promotion.
Yeah, it's a promotion
But
for
but they
sure.
do that the way that any group, like interpret the thing their way. It's
Yeah.
like MAGA say, "Oh, she was promoted," so Democrats say, "Oh, she was fired,"
Yeah.
and everybody believes what they want to believe.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody, because it was embarrassing how it happened. She was at the podium doing a press conference,
Right.
and the media found out. I mean, that happened to somebody else during the first term. The media knew that she was being, moved out of DHS before she did. But it was like, by the time I got done trying to look it up to see any details, there was already. She was going to be special envoy to the Shield of the Americas.
The Shield of the Americas, because Marvel's taking over our government there.
Everybody keeps saying that about the comic books. That's so funny. But
and we are the Americas that will be suffering it, or her.
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
They changed it to it's the American what is it? Counter Cartel Coalition. Yeah. After the initial meeting, that there's a little 1-page thing with like 3 little bullet points that every leader signed on to, and there's not really a lot of details about what that's going to entail, but it's obvious to me that the U.S. wants to put military bases in Latin America, and they found enough people to let them do that.
Right.
So
exactly.
They didn't invite Brazil, the biggest economy. They didn't invite Colombia, the 4th biggest economy. They didn't invite Mexico. Mexico's the U.S.'s biggest trading partner, right? Yeah. And then Venezuela wasn't invited, but I guess the Venezuelan government signed on to this America's Counter Cartel Coalition after the event. And I can't remember who else signed it. Paraguay, I can't remember, but yeah, there's a total of 17 countries, and I think it's this thing again, military bases. I think the little show of force in Ecuador had to do with the fact that the country voted against bringing U.S. military bases there. They had a referendum, and everybody voted against it. That doesn't mean the U.S. can't use Ecuadorian bases, and that's kind of what they're doing. In Colombia.
Yeah, and the cartels are the excuse. It's like, and actually, Novoa, he needs help with the cartels because he's shrunk his government so much that mafias just took part of the country, and he doesn't want that. He can deal with drugs, and export them with his banana company, but he doesn't want the mafias, like competing with him or killing people.
He wants control.
Yeah.
He wants to control everything. Yeah.
So
I mean, that's what it seems like to me anyway.
Yeah. So the United States is helping them, but that's the excuse to be military presence there, which
Yeah.
is what they want.
Yes.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
then
Because now they can do that in Colombia that easily. It's very restricted, and there are many countries. I mean, not many, but some of our countries, they constitutionally we can't allow them to have military bases.
right.
So we
Yeah.
are shielded that way. It's like we can't have them because our constitution says that. It's like Mexico. Mexico, they don't meddle with other countries because,
Right.
and they always say it's because our constitution doesn't allow
Yeah.
this to us. And that's
Right.
very good. When you can make a constitution that, does that for you and you don't have to make excuses, it's just what it is. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, we don't have those laws in the U.S. to stop lawmakers in Congress or the president from meddling in other elections. And we saw it last year when Trump was endorsing people, and then he was threatening the populations of those countries with cutting off remittances and ending trade deals and economic deals. And essentially, everybody's talking about this rightward shift in Latin America, but it's manufactured, right? That they were held at gunpoint, essentially. And I see that in a lot of what like Venezuela's doing right now, like Elizabeth was saying. You don't want to, say what you want, whatever. We don't care, because in this environment, it's not one where you want to start any trouble with somebody like Donald Trump, because he's so unpredictable and he's surrounded by volatile people like Hegseth and Kristi Noem, and these people are inherently violent people. You see Hegseth, who seems to enjoy the idea that he's killing people, with bombs and boats and in Iran and all this stuff. You see the same thing. You see the same thing with Noem, and with her doing this, Shield of the Americas thing. What she does is she's going to be a go-between between the State Department and the Department of Defense. And there's a reason those two are separate, because, you don't want to weaponize your foreign policy guy with the military guy. That's a conflict.
Yeah.
So she's going to be the fusion between the two. And
I don't think Marco Rubio was being as tough as Trump wanted him to. So he's created this position. Since Marco won't give him the teeth that he wants, he's going to bring up his little bulldog to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he did have that blunder where he said that, we attacked Iran because Israel was going to anyway.
Yeah.
And that would have made us a target. And then the next day he tried to walk that back, and he was repeating Trump's words. And, he had that blunder. And I honestly think that if it wasn't for the disastrous hearing that Kristi Noem had, Rubio probably would have been the first to go because he exposed Trump and admitted to essentially every conspiracy theory on the internet right now. And that we're going to war for Israel. So that was a disaster. That was a disaster.
All right. We've been over our hour. So I have something that I want each of you to do that's like an assignment for everybody that watches. So because we are unaware of a lot that goes on around the world, I want each of you to give your top recommended news source. And so for anybody watching, you may have to go behind a VPN to find these. So just bear that in mind. So each of you give, what is your top news source that you go to, that you trust, that tells the most accurate and full information about Cuba, about Venezuela, about Latin America? What's the news source that's your go-to?
That's a tough one because, to get a full, accurate type of thing, you kind of need to look around a little bit. But if you want to Venezuela, I would say Telesur. Telesur is good for a lot of Latin America. They might be a little bit slow. I mean, Latin America is big. So anything outside of Venezuela, Mexico, it might be a day late or a few hours late. But Telesur is really good. And then, as far as news wires go, I lean on France 24 sometimes. And of course, the AP and stuff, because, our media outlets, as much trouble as they are, they still have access to a lot of things. So a lot of people will leak stuff to the New York Times, the Washington Post, or so it's always good to like see what's being leaked, but then kind of ignore the narrative and go find a narrative from outside the U.S. Yeah. So yeah, France 24 is a good news wire, but aside from that, and France 24 covers all of Latin America too. But yeah, in Latin America, I would say Telesur TV. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have they have an English
I
version.
agree. I agree with Arturo. I look Telesur very much. As he says, it's very difficult. I know that Telesur is a socialist oriented, so
Right.
it has its bias, and but mainly it talks about Telesur's, Latin American perspective. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And you probably they can exaggerate some things, and you have to like be critical about it, but and of course they are very in favor of our government, which I am. So I know we have a lot of problems. We've done things wrong. We still have some corruption, very less than in the past. But still, I think Telesur is a good one. I have some local analysts that I like Indira Urbaneja, which I think is a good analyst, and some analysts at the La Iguana TV, which is pro-government, but they have very good people there. And I like very much the Gray Zone. Blumenthal, for me, is very serious, very accurate. Yeah. Again,
okay. I'm going to get
biased.
links from you guys, because when we send out the recap, I'm going to link to different news sources that people can go to, directly to check out this information, because nowadays I feel like it's almost a luxury to not be paying attention. And we should all be dedicating a little bit of our time every day to looking at legit news sources. I look at ground news myself every day. I like the way it gives the bias leaning of every article, and it gives you your blind spot. So I can see, it knows that I lean left. So my blind spot is what right-leaning sources are reporting that we may not be seeing. So that's always super valuable to let me see. You always want to know what the other side is saying,
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I watch CNN every day.
Yeah.
Because that's your bias in the United States, but I need to know what they're saying.
Right,
so it's the same. You already have a lot of right-wing bias, because for us, even Democrats are right. And so you need some, like lefty. Communicators.
We're behind the times on that. When AOC and Bernie Sanders are center left everywhere else.
Yeah,
we're way behind. We are way behind.
We are.
Yeah, especially AOC, because she's like a lot like a bot. It's like we don't want the attack to Venezuela, but I don't like Maduro. We don't like the attack to Cuba, but they're atrocious guy, and the same with Iran. So I don't like both. It's like when my husband comes to me and say, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry, but no, that is not the way it is."
I love that perspective. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. I appreciate both of you taking your time and even giving us a little bit of extra time. Sure. Like I said, every time I talk to you guys, and I've had multiple people who watch say the same thing. It's so educational. We come with a notebook and pencil and take notes, because we have to know this stuff to be proper voters. Educated voters, informed voters are powerful voters. So we have to know what's going on around the world to be able to vote on our representation here at home, so we don't hopefully get in this situation again. We have found ourselves in a mess and we have to get out of it. So education is one of the ways that we're gonna get out of this, is becoming informed. So I appreciate both of you so much. You're amazing.
Same here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having
I
us on,
thank
guys.
you very much. Yeah, I love these meetings. Next
Me
time
too.
we
Yeah.
have to talk about a topic that we didn't. It's our amnesty law.
Oh,
You know.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
All right, I'm making a note for next time.
Okay.
yeah,
we're gonna
because
talk about it.
I'm pretty sure that for the next month, you know, everybody who was supposed to be, you know, amnestied will be. So
Yeah.
we can know numbers exactly.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah. Okay.
All right, you guys. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
All right,
you.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, how do you